Hey everybody, Nick here, and today we're going to do a little disassembly and maintenance as well as a sneak preview on this little guy right here. This is the Spyderco Knives Peter Rassenti Paysan. Very interesting piece, and so let's go on ahead and take this guy apart. Whoops, should have got my little mat out here already. Okay. So, this is an integral pocket knife. That's the first big thing, the big piece of news on this guy. You can see here that this is an integral knife, which means the entire handle of this is made from one piece of titanium, with two exceptions. The clip is a different piece, which is the smart thing to do, of course, and there is a lock bar insert, which is another very smart thing to do. It is something that is different relative to the Spyderco Peter Rassenti Nirvana, which is what I've got right here. But the nice thing about integrals, or at least one of the nice things about integrals, is that it is very easy to take apart. So let's go ahead and pop this guy open. What I'm going to do here is pop out this screw, and it has to be this screw on the back side here because the other one is fixed in place. So I've got that there. Next thing I'm going to do, and by the way, centering was perfect out of the box, and action was a little bit slower actually out of the box. I have cleaned this guy out once already, just making sure off camera I was going to, everything was going to go back together correctly, but nevertheless, I'm going to go ahead and repeat it. What I just did there is I used this piece of mild steel here to pop the pivot out. Then what we do is we just pull the blade out, and I'm going to go ahead and put my finger behind the lock bar here just so I can very slowly let that down rather than letting it spring back into place. Then I've removed the blade along with its bearings. You can see here that the blade is well, this is a chunk of steel. So let's go ahead and clean this chunk of steel. We don't need to. This guy came literally from Spyderco this afternoon, but I will do so nonetheless so you get a sense of it. I'm using some isopropyl rub and alcohol right over here, and the 91 proof, is it? The 91%, that is. And so there you go. But the blade is very nice. You can see a couple of things. You've got bearing pockets milled into either side of the blade, which allow the bearings to drop into the blade for reassembly, which is actually a very easy process. And then we've got a detent ball ramp. See this little area right here? Yeah, that's to allow the detent ball to slide back up onto the blade easily. The handle itself is pretty uncontroversial. What you can see here is on the inside, got some very nice little milling areas down in there. You have the lock bar insert. In the lock bar insert, there is a ceramic detent ball from the looks of it. And that's definitely present. The insert means that there is not a hint of lock stick or anything like that. One other thing to note is that there is a stop pin here. This little guy right here is the stop pin for the knife. And importantly, that is not the same chunk of titanium as the rest of it. I'm sorry, that is not the same chunk as this titanium. And in fact, the only place that you can see even the slightest hint that there is a different piece there is at one little point here. There is the tiniest little crescent right there. You can see the tiniest little crescent where they press that extra stop pin piece through. That's pretty impressive work. The fact that you cannot tell that except when you're really looking for it, that's kind of nice. Pardon me, I'm just coming off a cold here. But anyways, so what we've got here is a very impressive straightforward handle right here with just the one screw. I can go ahead and clean up the bearings here a little bit. Just run them between this piece of paper, or this little fabric thing here. And the bearings are inside a phosphor bronze bearing cage, as Spyderco has been wont to do lately. These are steel bearing from the look of it, rather than a ceramic. Doesn't really matter, but there you go. And then let's go ahead and put this back together. I've been luxuriating in this. I probably could have already been done by now, but we'll go ahead and use some 10-weight nano oil here. Nice lightweight oil. Use a relative little of it here, because I don't super need a lot of oil. By relative little, I mean probably more than anybody else would use, but that's just the nature of my beast, if you will. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of oil onto the detent ball path here, just to make sure it is nice and close on this, or nice and smooth on the close. And then I'll drop this guy in here and rotate this bearing a little bit to distribute that as well. Make sure I don't get any gunk up in there. Now, the next step here is actually pretty straightforward. What I do is I pinch these two bearings to either side of the blade here, see? So everything is roughly flush. Next step is going to be to slide everything into position here. So I've slid the blade into place such that the two bearings are still present on the inside of the knife there. That's important. Now, this pivot here is not free spinning. That's a beautiful thing. You can see there is a D shape along the top of it there. They've cut out a little D shape. So I need to make sure that pivot is aligned with the D shape at the top there. And I'll start sliding that into here. Come here. There we go. Pop that loose. Now, in order to get the pivot the rest of the way through here, I'm actually going to have to, I'm using my index finger back here. I'm going to lift up on the lock bar. This is going to take the tension out of the system and allow that pivot to slide the rest of the way through, because the lock bar, I mean, by definition, the lock bar, which by the way is at a perfect 50%, needs to be in the right, it cannot be fully locked up, and, you know, yeah. The physics of a frame lock require that lock bar tension to be lifted for everything to seat properly. Then I'll use a little bit of Loctite here and screw this in. And the last step is just to tune the action such that everything is running smoothly but without any blade play. And there we go. Centering is dead on. There is zero play. And the smoothness on this guy is borderline frightening. This is a super freaking smooth knife. I am really, really impressed with the smoothness on this guy. This is, given it's a relatively heavy blade, but oh boy, is this thing smooth. So, 6 minutes and 15 seconds into it, we are completely done with the disassembly maintenance. That is one of the joys of an integral knife. And now that we've done this, let's go on ahead and do a first impressions little area here. If you are watching this down the road with the full review out, but, you know, hey, you can go ahead and skip this second part, but, you know, these are just my initial impressions. This guy showed up to me today. And actually, I should be very clear, this guy actually showed up to me directly from Spyderco. I ordered another Peter Rassenti Paysan from, from Knife Joy, knife retailer, and they, that should deliver tomorrow, because I didn't know if I was getting one of these guys from Spyderco. I mean, it's a big freaking expensive knife here. So I went ahead and I ordered one, both for the channel, and so I could spend some more time with it without worrying about damaging a potential charity piece down the road. But nevertheless, yeah. So this one did come directly from Spyderco. I've done my best not to let that affect my review, but there you go. Overall first impressions of this is nice. The elephant in the room here is $520. That's a good chunk of change right there. But the other thing, though, is $520 for a beautifully finished integral pocket knife here. If this knife were a custom knife, if this were sold to me by Peter Rassenti directly, if this were a custom, you know, made by some jackass in a garage, this could easily be a $1,500 to $1,600 knife. Technically speaking, execution-wise, this is basically perfect. I mean, seriously, looking at the machining here, it is absolutely freaking gorgeous. If we look at the overall shape of it, the overall finishing on it, the finish on the metal is beautiful. The finish on the blade here, it's going to be hard to show, and it's actually a little... Yeah, let me grab a cleaning cloth here and some detergent, and I will clean this blade off so you can really get a sense of the reflectivity that we've got going on here, because it is very, very impressive. But my biggest question here, and this is always the case when you're evaluating higher-end production knives, especially from big companies, a lot of folks' first impression is just like, oh my God, I could never spend that much. But okay, see, take a look right here. Holy crap, is that thing well mirrored. I can show you the window right there. Here is my picture from Frankie and Bird over there. This is really, really nicely done. The blade finish is absolutely gorgeous. So in terms of overall, oh man, is that smooth. In terms of the overall fit and finish and quality here, this is in line with, you know, $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 custom knives. This is really, really well made. Another thing that I do like here is the clip. Now, a lot of folks are actually going to go, oh my God, are you insane? But the thing is, we just had the Spyderco Drunken, which is a wonderful knife, but it was... the big dirt in this guy's punch bowl here is this clip. The clip just didn't end up working that well as a pocket clip, and that's important. This is a pocket clip that works very well as a pocket clip, and it's also beautifully angled, so this guy will hang nicely in the pocket here. And it's actually, ergonomically speaking, it works well. I mean, the clip on this guy is very, very nice for a functional pocket tool. If you were looking for pocket jewelry, you might choose a slightly different clip, and I can certainly see a world in which I would use a different clip. You know, something like this is a Casey Lynch clip here. It's certainly not unattractive on this guy, but nevertheless, I think the clip is a very nice choice, and to go that way is a nice choice as well. This guy, unlike the original Spyderco Peter Rassenti Nirvana, which I have right here, and this has, by the way, been reground by Josh over at Razor Edge Knives. But nevertheless, unlike the original Nirvana, this guy did not have a lock bar insert, and unfortunately then suffered a fair amount of lock stick until it broke in. This guy has a lock bar insert complete with an over-travel stop. You can see there in there is this little piece, which means that no matter how hard I press on this, I am never going to overextend the lock bar. This is important because on an integral knife, if you accidentally overextend the lock bar, you can't bend it back in the opposite direction like you could on a knife where you can take the whole damn thing apart. So I think that's a really important step forward. Overall, this may be the nicest knife that Spyderco has ever made. I say that without a whole lot of hesitation. There are only two real things that I'm not a huge fan of here, and both of them are pretty livable. One of them is the detent on this guy is towards the weaker side. Is this a bad detent? No. If this were a flipper knife, I wouldn't be as big a fan, but the thing is, it works just fine for flipping, for flicking, etc. It is okay, but it definitely does not. It doesn't pass the shake test. If you're living in New York City, well, this was illegal for 50 other reasons, but it is, the dent on this guy isn't the strongest thing. This is always a weakness coming out of Spyderco's Taichung plant, and in some ways I think it's perfectly fine. It's safe. It's not a problem, but the detent on this isn't super strong, and I might like it dialed up maybe a smidge. The other thing that's not amazing about this guy is the grind is not super thin. So what we can see here is that this guy, and we can look at the tip as well, the tip on this guy is not as thin as, for instance, on the Spyderco Drunken here. This is a nice, by the way, I'll do some size comparison in a second here. But if we look at thickness behind the edge here, in the sharpening choil, what we can see here is that the Paysan on the right there is substantially thicker at the edge than the Drunken is, even though these are both using the same blade steel, S90V, and even though the blades are roughly the same thickness, this guy is a it's a saber grind style thing, rather than being a full flat grind, and also the stock is markedly thicker on this guy. So, you know, that's where you're paying the price. Will it cut? Yeah, it absolutely cuts. However, I'd like to have seen them maybe go a little bit more aggressive on the grind there. But, you know, in the grand scheme of things, that's not bad. And compared to where the original Nirvana was when it first shipped, that's definitely an improvement. Size comparison real quick. Here it is against your Spyderco Delica, your Ontario Rat number 2, and your Spyderco Paramilitary 2. So you can see here, yeah, it's a reasonably sized knife. In fact, it's pretty big. Personally, I do wish this were a little bit smaller. I think that would be a slightly more compelling knife. This is my reground Spyderco Nirvana here, just to give you a sense. This is a bigger knife in the hand, as well as, I think, in the pocket. But, yep, there you go. And then here it is against your Spyderco Drunken, which in many ways is its most recent competition for the high-end piece from Spyderco. But anyways, my final conclusion on this guy, well, I'm sorry, my tentative interim, I've had this guy for 4 hours conclusion on this guy, is that it is very, very well done. I handled the prototype of this at Spyderco in June, May, someplace like that. Yeah, May, actually, and it was last May, that is. And it was very impressive, and indeed the final version of this guy is very impressive as well. This is pretty easily the nicest knife that Spyderco has ever made. It's a very expensive knife, that's for damn sure. I don't think it's, sure, would I've loved to see it come in cheaper? Absolutely. But honestly, I think for what you're getting here, this is really, really well done. And if you're looking for something that feels like a high-end custom and is a lot more obtainable, this isn't a bad solution. So, there you go. Okay, keep an eye out for the Paysan. They seem to be dropping. Certainly mine's dropping tomorrow, but nevertheless, interesting piece, and I hope this was interesting to you, and have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.